I purchased this John Deere X739 about 6 years ago. It has almost 300 hours on it. And every year I find something small to tweak on it or change on it. And I wanted to just take a few minutes, walk you through everything that I changed. They're all small, but I think every one was worthwhile. I'm passing it on and hope somebody can use it. The first one is, and I know many of you have done this, is I added some lights on the snowblower. And these vibrate pretty heavily, so make sure whatever you buy is get ones that are somewhat durable. Now, I know most people have done this. I can't believe John Deere doesn't have this chute actuator being standard. There's kits out there. I actually just bought the parts individually. My one recommendation is if you do it, use a typical flexible coil cord on that, because otherwise they break. I had one or two fail just because it was being used a little bit too much. I changed this chute rotator. Now the factory chute rotator turns a little less than 90 degrees, but there's times you want to blow it backwards a little bit. So we modified it so it turns about 130 degrees. Let me show you. So the way we did that is there's a cable inside of here that turns it, and the standard pulley on that is a 1-to-2 ratio. We just add an extra half a loop, so now it's a 3-to-1 ratio, so it rotates 50% further than it did before. The enclosed chain back here is, I think these are, I know they're factory now, but on the older versions there was an actual chain in here, and it was greasy and it was loud and it made a big mess. You can replace this with an enclosed unit, and I was surprised. John Deere was selling it when I bought it. I think it was between $200 and $300, which I thought was actually pretty reasonable for that enclosure for a John Deere product. Rubber extensions to that impeller, and it brushes all the way up against the sides, and it does extend that impeller a little bit. I do think it throws the snow 10 or 20% larger, and there's no downside, so I would encourage you to consider that as well. About the seat cover is it protects the factory seat underneath, and it also gives you a whole bunch of storage. And I always find there's never enough storage. So you can see in the back here I have a bunch of toe straps and whatnot, so works well. And then underneath of that I added some seat heaters, and you can buy these online, and it's literally just a heating pad underneath of here and underneath of there. And then I put a switch on the side in here. You can see the switch, accessory switch. There we go. So you can turn it low, high, and off. It works well, and but with the seat, you have insulation there, and you have insulation in your coat or your pants, and so the impact is moderate. I actually use like a motorcycle vest that's heated, electric, and I just plug it into the outlet here, and that seems to work much, much better. This factory John Deere steering wheel ball, the reason I bring it up, I thought it was a little bit of a gimmick, but I bet I use this when driving 90 or 95% of the time. It makes the tractor much easier to use overall. We added some armrests here. You can see these, they flip up and down. Pretty self-explanatory, but I find that I do use them quite frequently. Change the lights in the front and the rear to be LED. And these are all standard sizes, so you can buy them online or at the local auto parts store. So we changed the front and the back. They're brighter, they take less energy, and you should never need to change them. Of lights is this dash light. In the wintertime, and let me zoom into that, it just stands proud and shines a little light on some of the gauges here, or some of the switches. And the reason I did that is when you're blowing snow in the wintertime and it's dark out, sometimes it's hard to find these switches to go back and forth, you know, the actuator up and down. And so that helps. And in fact, on this actuator switch, I wanted to keep that a standard John Deere switch, which it is. The downside is you'll find the standard John Deere switch is a single pole, double throw, and you need a double pole, double throw. So with the benefit of a couple of relays underneath, you can actually make that conversion and make that factory John Deere switch work. That I actually filled out all of these switches along here, but I added this throttle spring. And quite frankly, oftentimes when you're at high throttle with the vibration, this thing will back down a little bit. So just to keep it up there, I added this spring. You attach it like that. I know it's kind of dorky, but it works really well. And it keeps you at full throttle even when it's vibrating. And when you're not using it, then I just slide it back in here and it works really, really well. The next thing we did, which is not a requirement, is we put hazard lights on. So I'm going to flip the switch here. You can go back here and you can see now there's hazard lights. Do I really need hazard lights on my tractor on a scale of 1 to 10? No, not really. But they look kind of cool, and if you're blowing snow and it's dark out and you want to prevent backing into somebody, you can do that. And then we used the reverse lockout switch, and every time you push that, it changes the pattern. And I think there's 21 different variables that are out there, but you get the idea. I added this small little USB output here, and you can see it has a voltage meter on it as well. And that way you can easily connect your phone and just leave it in your compartment and your phone is always charged. And you'll also notice that I put this little handle on the toolbox, $4 from Menards or $2 from the hardware store. This is always hard to get to because it pinches your finger, so this makes it a heck of a lot easier, and it's kind of a heavy one, so it keeps it shut as well. Added a second alternator to the tractor. Let me open this hood, open the hood, and there's the second alternator. The reason I added a second alternator, both the stock alternator and the second alternator, I think they're both 20 amps. The reason I did it is because in the wintertime, when I'm running the heated seats and the lights and everything else, I would get low voltage indicators on the dash once in a while. So now you actually have 40 amps, and it should be more than enough current to drive whatever you want to throw at the device or throw at the tractor. Or we changed this bypass so you don't need to push that button to reverse. We also eliminated the seat bypass, and you just do a jumper across that connector, so that way you're not cutting any wires. You can always plug it back in. I found this tractor always made a squeaky sound when I would push the brake. And so what I did is I went underneath, and there's a fluid protectant called fluid film. I sprayed it on the underside. It should prevent the rust as well, quite a bit, but I found it completely silenced the squeakiness there, and it silenced actually all of the little pedal movements and pedal noise. 739, so it's a four-wheel steer. And the four-wheel steer, and I'm gonna try to get a light on this here, this bracket. And this bracket right there has a tendency to go loose, and when it does, the back wheels can kind of shimmy back and forth when you're turning, when the lateral forces change. Well, what we did is I actually created a shim with just some like feeler gauges and stuck them in between the shaft and the frame. And then I put a grease zert on that, and it's a greasable event. You can see it, I just greased it today. But the good news is that shaft, or this, well, let me show you here. This transfer shaft is completely rigid. You can't move it at all. It works great, and it really made it easier to actually maneuver the tractor because that little bit of wiggle that you would get in the back tires is effectively gone. So I think that's about it. Those are the top 21 changes I would recommend for anybody with a John Deere 7 Series. Have a good day.